Hello, welcome to another episode of DJ Project Breaks Bad. This past weekend, I actually watched both seasons 3 and 4. Season 3 on Friday and season 4 on Saturday. And no, I'm not going to do two episodes back to back. I'm actually going to give a couple of days for my thoughts on season 4. And in a way, I'm glad that I did it because as I'm going to talk about it in season 4, I was able to make some connections between the seasons, and I do feel that both seasons 3 and 4 serve as sort of the apex, and I would even go so far as to kind of call this the Godfather 2 of of television in terms of just the general arcs established. And I'm going to get that more into season. This really comes through in season 4, but season 3 is sort of the setup. Now, again, this is a guy looking at the complete series in hindsight, and I'm sure for all the regular viewers, you have a completely different take on it. But again, this is why I'm doing this, is because this is sort of my chance to. Because I approached it in a different way than anybody else. It's an opportunity to see the series anew, as if you were looking at it for the first time. So again, no complaints, and it is appropriate to its subject matter. It is quite addicting, which is no surprise that I felt the need to take on 2 seasons back to back. I thought I was going to try to pace it out, but the way that the episodes work is because of the I don't want to call it twists and turns, but because of all the events, one leading to the next, you really want to know what's going to happen next. You want to know what's going to happen to pretty much all the characters. I mean, even the characters you don't particularly like, or certainly the characters that will serve as obstacles, such as Hank and a few others. But again, you really want to know what's sort of what's going to happen. So you end up just watching one episode after the next, and then several hours later you go, damn it. Again, before I go on, I want to be able to feel free to talk about the show in all of its details, so just assume that I'm going to go into spoilers, even though the point of this is not to give recaps about what's happening. This is just more about my thoughts, but again, I want to feel free to talk about any details that I want to. So, again, assume spoilers. So where we last left off, and I don't think I explained the ending of season 2 all that particularly well, but at the point of the story is that Walter was able to secure a better distribution deal with the meth that he was able to produce with Jesse, and thus he was able to make a lot of money out of this. Just shy of under $500,000, which ended up being shy of $500,000 for both him and Jesse. Also at that point, his daughter Holly was born, and then also Jesse's kind of reached a sort of a crossroads moment where he's has this romantic liaison that got cut short because of heroin overdose. Well, heroin overdose, and directly it was choking on vomit, but or asphyxiation through vomiting, but it was as a result of taking heroin. And this, of course, puts him into a depression. And then finally, Skylar, realizing that Walter has been giving her a bunch of bullshit this whole time, decides to actually separate from Walter because of this. Unless final thing that you see this mid-air collision that occurs right above Albuquerque, and this is the result of Jesse's girlfriend's father being distraught by her death, and he works as an air traffic controller, gave bad directions, and as a result, boom. It's called the Wayfarer 515 incident. So that's where we left off. And now, season 3, the big highlights were there's a revenge initially on Walter White, but then it later got deferred to Hank for the death of Tuco. This was under the orders of Hector. Some brushes with the Mexican cartel. Jesse tried to recover from his depression and also go through rehab, and then Walter dealing with the separation, and then finally kind of getting an offer. It's not quite an offer you can't refuse, but certainly an offer that it's really hard to turn down. Which is basically Gus giving him a very high-end, specialized meth lab and a highly lucrative salary. But then eventually you find out that if something's too good to be true, it probably is. And at the end, Walter suspects that Gus really wants it in on him, and is not only hoping to replace him, but also to finish him off. And so it's either you or me, and it ends with the death. So all that in the course of 13 episodes. Now, in general, television shows, if assuming that you want to go on for a considerable amount of time, the third, and I would say the fourth season as well, but I think definitely the third. The third is sort of the go big or go home moment. You either have to really, so you've already established your premise, you're already comfortable with the characters, and you even had some moments where you give your characters a chance to show off multiple dimensions, so that you can kind of get a full idea of what they tend to be like. You either have to really push it to make it go big, or you end up stagnating anything. You basically stop any character growth, or you just tread and save territory, and then you just end up rehashing the same thing over and over again. So I think the third season, I can imagine the third season coming out, and this is sort of the moment where if you didn't believe in Breaking Bad then, you would certainly do so now. I think overall with this particular season, you get to a point where it's also the point where both the past and the present will dictate future actions, and that's what will help keep it moving. I mentioned before there's the revenge of that was for Tuco's death, which was very early in the second season, and the ramifications of that. And then there's other little present moments that come in. Walter being sort of melancholic about being separated from Skylar, which was the whole reason why he was doing. The whole reason why he was doing this was for the sake of his family, and so he's about to lose his family. And then just suspicions, and then just constantly being on your guard, and maybe fearing for your life, but also making sure that you don't make the same mistakes again, that you don't get caught with your pants down, so to speak. Considering that the show started off with Walter being pantsless, but this is, of course, sort of a new so you try to be better than you were yesterday, and be one step ahead. And especially if you feel that for every step you take 2 steps back, and so basically you just want to try to be ahead of the game and come off on top and come out ahead. So all of that sort of plays out, and it gives it a bit more of a sort of a loose quality to it. As I said before, I think I still get the feeling that Breaking Bad has a nice balance of character and plot. But here, this is where the plot is definitely dictated more by the character's actions, until you start to realize towards the end that there is a goal that Walter has to meet, and you'll find out in the next season. It's basically it's either Walter or Gus. So, and then everything becomes more focused. So it doesn't make it aimless, or I should say that usually when the characters dictate the plot, it usually the bad way that it ends up happening is that the show will feel very aimless. It's basically anybody trying anything. It's not that anybody's trying anything. It's just that you take things. There are things happening at the moment you have to address. There are the little brush fires you have to put out, and then you're also thinking, what next? What am I going to do now? And then there are moments where you can anticipate a future move, and so you want to again just kind of be one step ahead. So, on that note, it should also be very clear at this point that this show, even though a lot is made of Walter White, the way the show is described, it's centered on Walter White. The way the merchandise is set up, it's all about Walter White. The show isn't really about him. And there are obviously a lot of other stories going on. There's of course there's Jesse's story, there's Skylar's story. Hank does have a story, although he still kind of is the guy who can potentially get him or can potentially stop Walter from doing what he's doing. But even then, he still has a story, and especially since he's thrown in the middle of the revenge on Tuco's death. He ends up being the guy who suffers, and then that creates its own sort of story arc. So it's not just the Walter White show. It's everybody's in on this, and I think that's one of the points is that action, not only do actions have consequences, but actions affect other people and their actions. I guess if I were to say something else about it, and I've also been talking in general about how this show relates to other shows, or it's a chance to talk about television shows in general. And I think I'm doing this is because this show is hailed as one of the greatest shows in certainly in recent memory, and probably in a long while. And when you make that kind of claim, it sort of begs you to look at the architecture, so to speak. How does the show work, and then you ask yourself the question, what makes a great show? Well, and again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating things that I've already said previously, but at the same time, I think if it's a good idea, it bears repeating. With television shows, it's really no different than film. The first sort of the basis of your relationship with a television program, like with a film, is that emotional reaction, and that depends on a lot of things. But basically, it comes down to: do you like the show or you don't? Do you like the characters or you don't? Is there something about it that you can connect with the show and then develop a relationship that way? And so, therefore, you can you can like anything regardless of quality. I mean, there are shows that are not of high quality, but people seem to like. But what makes a great show, it's not just dependent on whether you like the show or not. There has to be more to it than that. And I think one of the things that I don't know how to say it. I mean, there has to be a lot of everything has to work together. The writing has to work, the directing has to work, the performances have to work, and not just one person. And again, Bryan Cranston is got a lot of attention, and deservedly so. But it was in the third season when people really started to notice Aaron Paul, and he was also nominated. I believe he also won Best Supporting Actor in a Drama, the Emmy for it. Whereas Bryan Cranston is one of the four in the past 2 seasons. So it's everything, and it's not just it can't just depend on one thing. And one thing that some television shows like to use, that some, maybe most television shows like to depend on, is some kind of gimmick, some kind of thing that sort of hooks the audience in. One such device is the cliffhanger, where you set up a situation, then it's, oh, how is this going to resolve, and then tune in next week. That can only work so far. If you don't have really compelling characters, or if the storylines are really engaging, then the cliffhanger will just feel like a gimmick. And there are plenty of cliffhanger moments in Breaking Bad. I would say there are cliffhangers within the seasons. And again, this is what makes the show really addictive, and you really want to watch one episode after the other to really see what happens. But I think it works not because it's a cliffhanger, or because it works like a cliffhanger, but because it's everything that leads up to it. It's kind of like with music. I mean, there's certain things that you can do musically that can generate a reaction, whether it be a memorable chorus or something. But if everything else doesn't really work, then it may not be really worth it. So it's not just the one. You can't just bank on just the one moment or one thing to make your show work. It really has to be all parts. I think what makes a great show is when all the parts work together extremely well, and there really isn't, as they say, a bad note in it. Or that there's a low moment, or a moment where you just kind of groan, and everything seems to work fairly well. And even though this is supposed to be this particular season is supposed to be the looser one, where the season was not planned out in advance. I said that I wasn't gonna read as much background information, but I did do some skimming just to kind of wanted to sort of refresh, because it's been a while since I've seen season 3, as of the day of this recording. But also I just kind of want to get a chance to sort of gather my thoughts together, and I did find out that particular season was not planned out in advance. But even so, it still feels like it was well constructed. It wasn't just a complete free for all. There's still an idea that everyone who works on it knows what they want. There was a sense, whether they knew it at the time or not, of where they would want to go, and certainly a sense of where they didn't want to go. And I think they didn't want to be typical. And maybe that's the other thing, is that they didn't necessarily approach it like purely like a television show. They approached it like a character drama and a crime drama. So I think a lot of the conventions they employ are more akin to film, which is, again, I think this is why I've heard it said that if you're somebody that likes to watch film, you'll like Breaking Bad because it owes a lot more to cinema. I mean, there are things where the way that establishing shots are done, they definitely take advantage of the Albuquerque landscape, and it's quite picturesque, and I remember that full well, even as a kid, so it was really great to see that. And then there's also the thing that they like to do, especially in the first few seconds, and this is, you see this from the pilot episode, pretty much from the pilot episode onwards, is that you see these little enigmatic shots where you're not really sure what happens, but it's all there to set up something that's either going to be resolved in that episode, or, and I didn't mention this in the second season, but something is set up that will pay off much later on. In the second season, you see these shots of a burnt stuffed animal, like the eye is missing, and it's floating in the pool, and you're wondering like what the hell is going on. But you find out later that this was the result of the Wayfarer I-15 collision. And so it's those little setups that will eventually pay off. And again, I think a lesser show would have just done that just for the sake of intrigue, or just to be weird for the sake of being weird. But it's there for a reason. I think the first reason is to kind of get you intrigued and get you to watch it. But once you see where it pays off to you, go, oh, okay, now it all ties together, and people like it when things are tied together. It's been attributed to Billy Wilder, and I think others have said this too, filmmakers, in talking about how you convey information to the audience. But the phrase goes, show 2 + 2 and let the audience come to 4. If you do that, the audience will love you. And I think that's what Breaking Bad does. It sets up 2 + 2, and then you come to 4. And by having that active participation, by you filling in the gaps and coming to understand what's going on, instead of being told or saying, this is what's going to happen, or this is important, that creates a positive experience, and that certainly makes it a much more satisfying viewing experience, as opposed to just being told everything. So yeah, so far so good, and of course, since I know what the next season is, I also can say it's so far so good. But I'll just leave it at that, and I will talk soon about season 4. And until next time,